So through the magic of video editing, I'm going to show you how we built this box from a kit that you got from the Guild of Oregon Woodworkers. One thing I might recommend, think about buying 2 of them. You will learn a tremendous amount when you put the first kit together, and if you follow the instructions and follow this video, things will come out quite well. But like any time you do something for the first time, you'll learn a lot, and having a second kit to show what you've learned, it'll be a good idea. So the kit comes with 6 pieces of wood, a top, a bottom, and 4 sides. The sides have been pre-cut with a miter, and the miter lets you have a very nice corner joint for both strength and for good looks. Also in the kit is felt for the bottom, and the hinges, which include the brass screws and a 5/64 inch drill bit, which we'll talk about in a little bit. In addition, what you'll need is a piece of cardboard, and that's going to be used for the bottom to put the felt in, so you have a removable bottom. You'll need a yellow glue, and we highly recommend yellow glue, which is made for wood. If you just have white glue, that possibly can work, but we don't recommend that. You'll need a very fine Phillips screwdriver for the brass screws in the hinge. And it's nice if you have a drill to drill the holes for the hinge, but there's ways that you can get around that if you don't have a drill. You'll need a marking device, either a pencil or a marking knife, and you'll need some blue tape. Lastly, you'll need some type of saw. Here's 2 types of saws. One is a Japanese saw, which cuts on the pull stroke, and the other is called a rip saw, which cuts on the push stroke. I guess if you didn't have anything and you were going to go out and buy a saw, I would recommend a Japanese saw. They're easier to use, and I think you'll get finer cuts. Of course, if you have a bandsaw or a table saw, then you'll be able to use those. Lastly, you'll need some sandpaper and some sanding blocks. This is one example of a foam-based sanding block and sheets of sandpaper, because the first thing we're going to do is sand all the pieces. So you want to sand the pieces to 220 or 320 grit, and just takes a few swipes here because they've been pre-sanded pretty well. And do that for all the pieces up to, as I say, 220 or 320 grit. And just a side note, you only need to sand the tops and bottom of the sides, as the edges will be covered with the top or the bottom. The next step is to determine what's going to be your top and what's going to be your bottom, and what's going to be your front and back. So for the top and bottom, we have two nice pieces of wood. Either of them would work well. I think I'm going to use this one. It's got some good figure in it, and when you apply the finish, which is going to be an oil finish, this figure will just pop. One thing I wanted to mention in selecting your top and bottom, you want to check how flat they are. And you can see here, there we go, you can see here where these are both not totally flat. That's not a problem. What it tells you though is that when you attach the top and bottom, you want the curvature to go such that the corners will touch the corners and won't leave a gap. If you do it the other way, it's going to be hard to clamp because you're clamping to bend the wood against the grain. So in addition to what it looks like, check out the curvature and put the concave side towards the four sides of the box. So that's going to be the top. For the front or back, we have these two pieces, and they're both gorgeous pieces of wood. I think I'm going to pick this one for the front and this one for the back, and then the sides don't make a lot of difference. So we're going to be putting it together basically like this. With the top, and this will be on the bottom. So before you put all the pieces together, we want to draw out a piece of cardboard for the bottom. So we're going to start with the bottom piece of wood. That's the size, and it's going to go inside it's going to be fit inside the sides. So so we're going to draw that out, both the width and the length, and we want some room for folding. So basically, we're going to cut this piece right here, and just to give you an idea, it's going to end up being 6 inches by about 3 3/8. And at this point in time, we just want to sort of see if we're close, and just temporarily tape these up, and that's going to be our bottom. Since we're going to assume that you don't have clamps, we're going to use a what we call the wrap-up method, and that's where we lay the pieces out this way, and we're going to put blue tape along the back so that when we apply the glue to the joints here, we're just going to wrap this up and let it set. So first thing we do is I'm going to turn it over. And then we're going to apply a couple lengths of tape. Make sure the edges are touching each other, and have enough overhang so that when you fold it up, they'll come together and tape on the last side. So I'm going to flip that over, and now we're going to take our glue, apply a little bit of glue to each side. And we're going to take a little brush, or you can take your finger and just brush it out so you have an even coverage of the joint. Now you don't want a lot of glue here. You just want enough glue to cover the surface. More glue is not going to make it hold any stronger, but you will have to deal with squeeze out if you put a lot of glue in there, and have to clean it up afterwards. So we'll do all 4 joints. And you'll hear the term end grain used a lot. End grain is what we're putting glue on. And if you think of a tree as made up of a whole bunch of straws that carries the water and nutrients up the tree, the end grain is the end of those straws, or the beginning of those straws. So when you put the glue in, you'll notice that glue will soak into the end grain a lot more than it will soak into side grain, which is the front and the back of these pieces. And again, if you don't have a brush, just use your finger Glue is water soluble, so you can just clean it up with water. And now we're going to take this and we're going to fold it up. And you want to make sure everything is quite tight. You can also use big rubber bands if you have them. So what we're going to do now is let it dry for about an hour, maybe a little bit more. And then we're going to come back and do the top and bottom. By the way, this is also a good time to clean up any squeeze out glue. Like in this corner, if you can see, there's a bead of glue there that will clean up. You can do clean up glue two ways. One is you can take a wet cloth or paper towel and clean it up immediately. Or you can wait a little bit for the glue to dry, and then with a sharp knife, the glue will just pop out. So your choice there, but don't forget to clean up the squeeze out. So for those of you that are anxious to get this thing done, we're going to also we're going to show a way that we can just do all 6 pieces of wood to start with. So putting the top and bottom on, fairly easy process. Again, you're going to spread a light coat of yellow glue on the bottom. And again, you can use your finger or a brush. And again, you don't need a ton of glue. I probably have a little bit more here than I need. But you do want to make sure you cover all the surfaces. So that's the bottom. Line up the sides very carefully. The pieces have been cut pretty accurately, so they should fit very well. So now we're going to do the top. Spread out the glue. Make sure you decide what side you want to be the top. Let's go with this one. Line it up. Now for the top and bottom, you can clamp it, you can tape it, but when you first put the glue on, the glue is very slippery, so it's hard to keep things in line. So what I like to do is just put a heavy weight on it for a few minutes, let the glue set up, and then clamp it a little stronger. So I just have this block of wood. And again, I'm going to check the corners and the ends. Make sure everything is in line. So we're going to let that set and come back and do the next part. So here we have our box. It's all glued down. Take a look at all the corners and edges. There's some squeeze out here that we'll take off with sandpaper. But in this case, it looks really good. If you do have a gap, a minor gap, then you can get some wood putty and just fill it in there, let it dry for an hour or so, and then sand it flat. But there you go, there's the box. So how do you get in the box? Well, this is going to be where we're going to cut the lid, and it is by far the most delicate part of the operation, and we'll talk about 3 different ways of doing that. So if you fill any gaps with putty or whatever, let it dry, and then we want to do a final sanding of the outside. So I'm starting with an 80 grit sandpaper. And that's all I need. The sides look pretty good, just a little bit of squeeze out that we'll get rid of with a few swipes. After you've finished sanding the top and sides, take a look at your corners. This one is actually pretty good, but if you have a gap there, what you're going to do is just take your 220 or 320 sandpaper and just round over the edges. Just a few swipes will make a huge difference in how it looks and also how it feels. It'll feel nice and smooth and round. So there we have the box ready to finally take the top off. So we want our lid to be about 3/8 of an inch, which is, including the top, which is about 1/8, would be a 1/2 inch down from the very top. You can use whatever measuring device that's handy, a ruler or this here. Mark all 4 sides. Draw a line here so you have a visual cue of where to cut. So now we have lines all around so we know where we're going to cut. So now we're ready to take the top off. There's 3 different ways you can do this. You can do it by hand with a hand saw that we're going to start out here, show you. You can do it on a bandsaw, which is probably the best, or you can do it on a table saw. If you're going to use a table saw, set your blade to about 3/4 of an inch high, and we're going to cut the sides and one front or back first. So you'll take it through, flip it, do this side, and now we've got a lid that's just hanging on by one side. It's got a little play there because of the saw blade removed wood. So look at the space of the kerf, which is what the saw blade makes, and put a spacer on the back side here before you make your last pass on the table saw. That will keep all 4 sides equal. So if you're going to do it by hand, start with the saw that you have. In this case, a Japanese saw, as I said before, cuts on the pull stroke. Start on a corner and start cutting. Watch your lines, make sure you're going straight. Once you got one corner, do all 4 corners. If it doesn't come out even, we'll take care of that in the next step where we sand the top and the bottom to be flat. If you have a bandsaw, you're going to set your fence to the right dimensions. Right here is where we're going to cut. Your guides here to just above the height of the box, and then make sure you have a push stick available, and we're just going to go ahead and so we have our box here. Now in doing that, use the push stick. Our recommendation is always stay 3 inches away from the blade when you're using a table saw or band saw. So once you have your 2 pieces, or top and bottom, most likely you're going to have, these are not going to be totally flat. So the goal is to, when you put them together, to not have a seam or a gap. The easiest way to do that is get a sheet of sandpaper and either clamp it down or glue it down to a flat surface, and then just, I would start with 80 grit if you have a lot. In fact, I would always start with 80 grit. Feel around there for any ridges, and keep doing that until everything is smooth. Do the same thing with the top. until you got a good fit. So now we're on to the next step is to put hinges in. So when you're getting ready to do the hinges, first of all, make sure you know which is the front and the back. So this is going to be our front. And mark the back in both the box and the lid, just with an X to make sure you don't get confused, because believe it or not, that is pretty easy to do. So now I wanted to check spacing on the hinges. So just place them to any place where you think will work. And in this case, I like that. And about an inch away from the edge. So we're going to mark that with the pencil. Make sure the other one is also the same distance, an inch. So we've marked our hinges here and here. And now we're going to cut a small mortise out. The mortise is just removing some wood so that when you put the hinge in, it will be flat with the rest of the wood. If you have a vise, it comes in really handy here. But if you don't have a vise, don't worry about it. You just need you just need a way of keeping the box from moving, whether someone is holding it for you or you come up with some other mechanism. The chisel has a flat edge and a rounded edge. You want to put the flat edge against the outside of what you're cutting. So this is, I'm going to put it right there. Make our mark, flip that around, do the other side. And then we're going to go along the back. So that's our mark. And now we're going to basically chisel out just the depth of the hinge, which is, so you can make a number of cuts this way. And now we've got a series of cuts, and we can just start taking them out. So now we have a nice clean place for the hinge to set. To make it easier, I would take a little piece of tape and tape them down so they don't move on you. Leave your holes open. Now if you have a drill, just a simple matter of going into the center of the opening there. If you don't have a drill, just take the drill bit, center it into the hole, and just sort of pound it in to get a start. Because that's what we need here, is enough wood, hole in the wood, so that the screw will have a chance to go in and bite. This is where your small Phillips screwdriver is essential. These screws are extremely fragile and tiny, and being of brass, they'll strip quite easily. So basically get it into the hole, and start screwing it in. Screw the screws in the hole as flat as you can so the head of the screw doesn't rise above the hinge. So if your hinges don't line up or not straight, then here's a trick that you can use to amaze your friends. Take the screw out, and what we're going to do is take that hole that we have used in the last time, take a toothpick or some slivers from a piece of wood, take a little dab of glue, and what you're going to do is take those pieces and force it into that hole, and now you've got basically starting over again with fresh wood. Now you can take your hinge again, and we're going to drill that hole. Just be real careful with the brass screws because the heads will strip really easy. So if you are using it a second time, keep your pressure as hard as you can straight down so you don't strip the head. And then flip the box over, a little spacer under the main part, and screw your brass screws in again. So there we have our box. So the next step is to move on to finishing, as well as doing the felt inside bottom panel. So we have our felt bottom. If you have someone in your household that is good at stuff like that, do enlist them. You can attach to the back with tape, with glue. You can put a little bit of glue around the edges on the top, and if you keep it real light, the glue won't seep through the felt. But if you put too much glue in there, you'll get a little splotchy, which you don't want. So we have our box. Now the fun part is when we put a finish on, it's going to make all this really pop. When you're doing a project like this is a relatively small project, but you saw all the tools and stuff that we had out. And one thing that I highly recommend for people starting to do projects like this is PSA. Put stuff away when you're done. Otherwise you have crap all over your workbench, and it's nice to have a nice clean open area that you can do work on. So we're going to go to the finishing stage now, and the first thing I would recommend that you do is, we have sanded this, but now is a good time. Take your finest sandpaper, 320 or even higher if you want, and just go over all the top, the bottom, and all four sides. It'll just take a minute, and a good finish is only as good as the surface it goes on. There's a lot of finishes you can use. You can use straight walnut oil, mineral oil. I like to use this Danish oil, Watco Natural Color Danish oil. It will be, it doesn't add color, but it will just make the grain and any figure in it just pop. You can get it at Home Depot or any big box store. Not very expensive. So you want to put your protective gear on, gloves, since you're working with oil, and just a good idea anyways to put gloves on whenever you're working with the finish. Then for the applicator, it can be pretty much anything. You know, you can use old t-shirts, rags, or paper towels. In this case, I'm just going to use a paper towel. Another idea good idea, when you buy your consumables like glue and finish, always mark the date you bought it. Glue has a shelf life of 1 to 2 years. Keep it fresh, and same with finish. Some finishes have longer shelf life than others, but mark it. So now we're going to take our pad, just fold it a couple times, and start applying our finish. And depending on the wood and how long it's been, some of it is real dry and will soak in quite a bit. And you just keep applying it until it no longer soaks in. You can start to see the finish really pop, and you can see the figure really pop there. So I just wanted to take a look at what the oil does. So see how that just makes it, all the figures just really pop and look spectacular. The wood that came with this kit was so dry and so figured, the oil just kept soaking in. So rather than spend all day just putting small coats on, I got a little pan and I poured some of the oil in there, and then I just soaked the whole box. Just let it sit there for a few minutes on each side, or especially on the dry sides, and eventually it'll stop soaking in. Then we're going to take a dry rag and wipe all the excess off and let it set for a while and dry. So now we're just going to wipe off all the excess oil. Been soaking for a good 15-20 minutes. So there we have our box. It's a beautiful front. Lots of character on the top. Even on the bottom looks good. We're going to let that dry, put our felt insert in there, and you just built a jewelry box. You could do things, you could put a mirror up here if you wanted. So if you got this far, congratulations.